Sarah Soar, welcome to the podcast. It is great to see you today, and I've
Pleasure.
been genuinely looking forward to this because we've had a number of different conversations
Mhm.
over the past couple of months. Today, it's an interesting one for many reasons because this series has been looking at what does the future look like, and today we're talking about whether leaders need to protect their nervous system as well as their balance sheet. And I know that there's a slight irony to this because even though it's a future fit, we'll be looking back at probably some techniques which are quite traditional in terms of yoga and breath work.
Mhm.
So I think when I was writing up my prep notes, there's a bit of an irony to this, really. As we look forward, I'm almost sort of having a conversation about looking back as well. But anyway, it's great to see you and welcome to the
Thank you
podcast.
very much.
Okay, so let's start off with your background then, because as they say now, you have lived experience in terms of leadership.
Mhm.
I think that's a new age term. I sort of say you've got the T-shirt, been there and done it.
Yes.
But maybe you can give us a bit of a potted history with regards to your background in wealth management and give us an understanding and a flavour of the types of businesses you've been working at.
Sure. Well, thank you, James, very much for inviting me along today. So my career in wealth management started 40 years ago with Burn Dolphin. I trained to be an investment manager. As part of that journey, and I ran money for 15 odd years, and then I moved more into the management space. Ran an office, then ran a series of offices, and then was appointed to the board of Burn Dolphin as the first female executive director in its 250-year history.
Wow.
So that was quite a milestone in its own right. So that was very much an experience of over a period of 29 years, I hasten to add. So, and not only did I run money, but I run offices, but I also ran various different teams and set up business development teams and marketing and all sorts of things. So I had a hugely diverse career there, which I absolutely loved. And then I moved on from Burn Dolphin and went to JM Finn as head of investment management there. And of course, Burn Dolphin was a publicly listed company at the time. So being on the board of Burns was, facing the shareholders every year at the AGM, and obviously having to report to those shareholders on a regular basis. And the staff, many of the staff, in fact, most of the staff were also shareholders in the company, which I think was actually one of the key things that Burns did extremely well. JM Finn had just been acquired by Dellen Private Bank, Belgium-backed company, when I joined a year later. And I was there as head of investment management for about 6.5 years. And then I was headhunted to Hawksmoor as their CEO. And I joined there in October 2019, which, as everybody watching this will know, was just before COVID. So that was a bit of a baptism by fire because I had barely got my feet under the desk, so to speak, when we went into lockdown. So, and it was at the same time as Hawksmoor was being acquired by Hurst Point Group, private equity-backed organisation by Carlyle. So, so that was a learning curve of some epic proportions into the unknown of a pandemic and an acquisition done, as it turned out, completely remotely. So, yes,
Madness.
a few challenges on the way.
Do you look back over your career with fondness?
Oh, very much so. I fell into it completely by accident. I actually wanted to be a doctor. And I always say physics is spelt with an F because that's what I got at A level.
Seriously?
Seriously, I got
Oh,
an F for physics.
wow.
I managed to get it up to a D, but that was not enough to get into medical school. So
How come? Were you quite outgoing, enjoying yourself, or didn't?
No, I shouldn't really have ever done physics in the
Not for
first
you.
place. No,
Yeah.
But that was my sort of first massive. But it proves that actually failing something for me turned out to be one of the best things that could have ever happened, but it didn't feel like that at the time. But so I then went on and decided, well, I had 3 sciences degrees to read marine biology and zoology, but still then didn't know what I was going to do afterwards. And I literally met a bloke in a pub.
Where's this going?
And he said, what I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a dealer for a firm of stockbrokers in the city. Well, I thought a dealer was something to do with drugs. I didn't know what a stockbroker was. And I thought there were lots of cities all across the world, so I didn't know what the city meant. And I sort of said, that's very nice, and never really thought much
How
more
British.
about it. Yes, I was frightfully British. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I've just finished at university and I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Anyway, the following week, he phoned me and said, there's a job going as an assistant to one of the, they were partners then, at my firm. Wondered if you'd be interested. So I went along for an interview, and that was my start of my career at Burnout.
Wow. So a loss for the medical profession. Certainly we gained in that respect. So you've worked for different types of organisations, from private companies, public companies, and also private equity. What of those companies or those structures or cultures taught you about dealing with pressure? And when did you start investigating or learning? I'm not sure how we should phrase this, but the other side, the yoga, the more sort of inner work, put it that way. So when did that start to happen?
Okay. So I was first introduced to yoga by my greatest friend, Katie, who was actually teaching yoga back in the 70s in her living room in Kingston, long before yoga became a big thing in the West. And she used to say to me, as I was sort of developing my career, you might find yoga is quite useful to sort of deal with the stresses, because pressure really starts actually as an investment manager. You're under pressure to actually get your portfolios to perform for your clients. That sort of pressure is there from day one, and then as you go, for those who do go more senior, like myself, then you've got the pressure of managing the people who are managing the portfolios and then managing the balance sheet. And so the pressure starts certainly in wealth management from virtually day one, really. And she used to say to me, have you thought about, I've got time for that. And she said, no, one day, just think about it. Never applied any pressure. But I remember starting to think, well, maybe there might be something to it. So she would sort of introduce me to small concepts like a bit of breath work, but I didn't really start to take it particularly seriously until, towards the end of my career at Burnout, actually. And that was when I was purely London based at the time. And I was starting to go to yoga classes and going, I think this is actually helping. But I couldn't really have put my finger on it. I just knew I felt better. I mean, I was always enjoying exercise, what we would all call normal exercise, whether it was walking the dog or playing tennis or all the sort of other things. But just starting to incorporate a bit more yoga into my life, not on a daily basis by any stretch of the imagination at the time. It was, a once a week yoga class at the very most. But I always left feeling better, always. I can still say to this day, I don't think I've ever got off a yoga mat once without feeling better in some shape or form. And sometimes you can't even put your finger on it, but you just feel better.
Yeah. And because I know there are different types of yoga practices. So what did you start learning from the outset?
There are. And the traditionalists of going back 2,000 centuries would say that actually it's the Western world which has created these different types of yoga. But you are right. We in the West categorize yoga into whether it's yin, whether it's hatha, whether it's kundalini, there are so many different types, and they tend to organize yoga classes around a certain category. But yoga can span pretty much anything. And quite frankly, if you're just, shaking around a bit, then you could argue that that's yoga in a funny sort of way.
Yeah, because I've been to a few yoga classes, and I went to the hatha one. I thought that's quite good. Then I went to another one, and that was quite competitive and quite hard as well.
Yes.
And I found it quite difficult to
Yeah.
focus on the breath as well as the movement.
Yeah.
So I ended up feeling better, but still, like, I'm not sure that works for me as much as the other one, which was fairly relaxed.
Yeah, some people, everybody finds their sort of niche of what they enjoy doing. And actually, unfortunately, sometimes people go along to a yoga class and it's absolutely not their thing. And of course, they get put off then, and they go, well, I've done yoga once and I didn't like it, and then only years later discover that there are so many different types. And anybody who's starting yoga from scratch would not want to go to one of the more fast-paced ones. Or, of course, now hot yoga, for example, where there are yoga pods which are dotted all over the country now, that's more designed. I mean, the argument is that it's designed around where yoga originally came from in India, in the desert, where the temperatures get up to 30, 40 degrees. And therefore
Like today, then.
Like today, exactly. Yeah, good hot pod yoga today for the whole of country. But a lot of people go that really almost as an exercise regime rather than necessarily doing yoga. The problem with westernized yoga is some of it, not all of it by any stretch of the imagination, but some of it has strayed into what I would call an exercise class labeled as yoga rather than actually being a proper yoga class. And I call it Lululemon yoga because there's a certain type of person who goes along and they do it for the exercise, and they're basically doing a workout. And I've been to a few of those in the past and thought, this isn't yoga, not really in its truest form.
What is the essence of yoga then, as in the actual meaning and in its truest sense?
In its truest sense, it is finding your true self mentally and physically. So, and a lot of how you think and how you are mentally is actually reflected in the body. There's a book, The Body Keeps the Score, which very much shows that, we all know that when we are stressed or, having various experiences, it can manifest in the body in a variety of ways, whether it's a tight between the shoulder blades or headaches or all sorts of different symptoms, which can be dissolved, shall we say, by various yoga practices. So it's quite profound in the linking between mind and body, which sounds very woo-woo, but is actually just basically science.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that because I think there is certain perceptions in the in sort of society anyway. But going back to where you were, so your friend got you into it, you were practicing it, you enjoyed it, and then you said it started to become a bit more at the end of Brewing Dolphin. At what point did it start to become more than just a hobby? And at what point did you start discussing it with other people? Were you open to sharing this? Because I found if you say things like yoga or meditation or breath work, then you could be considered a bit woo-woo, you're a bit out there. So at what point did you start to become a little bit more open with it?
I certainly started to talk a bit more about it when I actually moved to JM Finn. I was in London all week. When I'd been at Burn Dolphin, I'd been at sort of a bit all over the place because I was managing lots of different offices. So I was not consistent in my yoga classes. Whereas when I was in London all week, and I would go to a couple of yoga classes a week, and when you have that office chat of what did you do last night? Oh, I went to a yoga class, and there were a few people who did do yoga there, and so that was a sort of a common thought. But I still hadn't really connected how much, even then, how much it was helping me on a day-to-day basis with my job. I just thought it was something that, made me feel good, and, I enjoyed doing, and I looked forward to going to the classes. But I didn't really make that connection, I don't think, until I actually went to Hawksmoor, and we had the whole period of becoming CEO, having to manage a firm. I had barely met all the staff before we went into lockdown.
Yes, lockdown, yeah.
Then having the acquisition, and I thought something I have got to do to manage my way through this, and that was when I started doing yoga on a daily basis, and that was when I really noticed how much it was actually helping me. So I would, because obviously we were all stuck at home, and I thought, well, I'm going to go mad if I don't do something. So I started practicing yoga on a daily
So
basis.
it's 2019, 2020 when you really started to pursue it, and that was because of lockdown and the situation. And
yes, and I talked to Katie, and I said to her, she was very, very helpful in terms of saying, just try doing some of these. And I was following, she got quite well known, Yoga with Adrienne, who's a rather charismatic, I think she's Texan girl, who got a lot of people following her because, again, she did very simple yoga that most people could follow. So I started doing that. And then I got a couple of apps and realized that I could actually do great yoga classes. And there were lots of other apps. I just, this was the one I happened to run with. And I just thought, gosh, this really, and there are so many classes on these apps, and you can just choose whichever one you want. And I just found it made me feel so much better and calmer, managing all the sort of different things that one was trying to juggle all at the same time. And and that was when I started to think there is really definitely a connection here between what I'm doing on a daily basis on the yoga mat and how it's playing out in my working life.
That's fascinating. So you've been learning about yoga anyway, and where are you at the moment with it then? Because you're not at Hawksmoor anymore.
Nope.
You've left. So what does life look like now?
Rather different.
Yeah.
About 2 years before I left Hawksmoor, when we were acquired by private equity, it was made very clear that this acquisition was going to be probably a 5 to 7 year tenure. And I knew that because of my age, I was certainly not going to carry on being CEO after that sale. So I started to investigate more about how I was finding the benefits of yoga and looking at it literally from a corporate perspective. And so I looked to train as a yoga teacher before I left Hawksmoor. And that was how I met Sanjeev Banot, who is the yoga guru. He wouldn't want me to call him a guru, but I can't think of another word to describe him. I first connected with him and his colleague in 2024, and have subsequently gone on to work alongside him, and really understanding the traditional yoga. He was born in Rajasthan in India, and basically he has been practicing yoga, as do the rest of his family, literally from the day he was born, virtually. Wow. And he has taught me so much about actually what traditional yoga means and how it really does affect and complement and help all of us on a day-to-day basis. And in the Western world, it has become obviously very, very popular, partly as an exercise. But I don't want to decry. There is an awful lot of people teaching yoga now who, are following very much the traditional methods. But becoming a yoga teacher and yoga classes and schools have popped up everywhere, which is great. It's really, really good because it is actually getting more and more people involved in it. But it does tend to be much more women who do yoga than men. Which
that's true, yeah. The classes
is,
I've been to, it's 90 or 80% women.
Yes, exactly. In India, it's completely the opposite way around.
That's it.
About 80% of the classes, but 80% of people who practice yoga are mostly men.
Why is that? Why is there such a difference?
Just tradition.
Is it?
It's just tradition, and I think it's psychology of the Western world. A lot of men don't really think that that's something that they should be doing, or that they can do, or they want to do, which is slowly changing. So, some of the top sports stars, for example, I know Novak Djokovic does yoga on a regular basis. David Beckham was probably one of the first well-known sporting people to actually practice yoga and publicly talk about it. And a lot of people are starting to see these, well-known celebrities. I think it's Manchester City football team, very openly talk about the yoga that they practice. And this is to manage the psychology of what they do and to complement what in this case is football, rather than just talking about the physical benefits of it. So,
It's mad, isn't it? It's mad that it's got a perception like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It is absolutely crazy, because when I have found this fascinating as I really have started on this journey of trying to introduce. Well, I've actually, to be honest with you, stopped using the word yoga, because if I say it, I mean, last year I was talking to a few CEOs in the wealth management industry and saying, have you ever thought about doing something like this? And as soon as I say the word yoga, the shutters come down, and I think the most common phrase was, well, I can't really touch my toes. Or I do Pilates, it's the same thing, isn't it? And you go, well, no, it's not exactly.
Is this mainly men that react like this?
Yes. Or I don't think it's really for me. Or, and there's a sort of just shut off. So I thought, okay, I'm clearly, I'm not selling this the right way.
And how did you react to that? Because you've seen the benefits. You've always felt better. So when people are quite dismissive, how do you sort of react to that?
Frustration, I think, feeling, well, and then I breathe.
Zen.
No, it is frustrating, because you think, well, to just shut down something without really even considering exploring it. I don't know whether as a child and as a mother, there's a Dr. Seuss book called Green Eggs and Ham. I don't know whether you've ever come across it, but I have quoted it on more than one occasion, particularly in the last year, because I just say simply, give it a try, and not to a Lululemon class when you've never done a yoga class in your life, but actually just have a class with somebody who could just talk you through and show you some moves which you may just find beneficial. And quite often people are doing these exercises, doing yoga moves, which are stretches. I mean, if you call them different things like stretches, or don't use the yoga terminology, but actually use more gym terminology, they'd be amazed at actually how much yoga they're probably doing anyway. But just don't use the word yoga, which, again, as I say, seems to create connotations. And one guy who actually did say to me, Sarah, have you gone all woo-woo on us? And
Wow. What did you say?
I was actually quite speechless. I just went, well, if you think this is woo, do I look woo-woo? I mean, what is woo-woo anyway? And actually, as a friend and a colleague of mine said, it's not woo-woo, it's woo-hoo, because honestly, you do feel so much better when you get off a yoga mat. You want to go woo-hoo. So
It's true.
it's just perception. And I have said throughout my whole career, perception and reality are often so far apart. And actually, when people realize that they're probably much closer to doing yoga, or even doing yoga and without realizing it, than they could possibly ever know. But because it's labeled like that, so I thought, right, I'm not one to give up easily. So
No,
I
I can
thought,
tell.
right, change the terminology, and look at this also in a wider context of other things which actually people can potentially relate to. And that really is based around sleep, nutrition, and breath work. So it's really around those sort of 4, what I call the key pillars of life, which, you cannot function without sleep, you cannot function without breathing, you cannot function without food, and you can't function without moving. And those 4 make up what I would say is the sort of the key basis of actually health management, as I call it, which
I have to say that is genius. It really is very good.
Well, it was quite funny because, again, it was born out of sheer frustration, because when I do think that words like wellness and well-being are overused and can apply to such a wide variety of things. It's impossible to actually say, what does wellness mean, or what does well-being mean? And even I myself found myself using words which I didn't really want to. And again, it was, as I say, born out of sheer frustration of how can I explain to people in a corporate world, which I have inhabited for the last 40 years, that actually this isn't some floaty thing where you wander around, in bare feet and long hair and whatever. But actually is something that can be applied as much to somebody wearing a suit as it can be to somebody wearing a pair of leggings. And I was talking to somebody about wealth management, and the word just came out, and I said, well, it is actually health management at the end of the day. And when we talk about wealth management, we talk about running portfolios, or this is probably more investment management, but it's not just, but, running portfolios, they've got to be diversified,
Correct.
de-risk, all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking, well, health management's the same thing. You diversify the type of exercise that you take, and diversify the way you look after your mind and body. So it's not just about running, or just about going to the gym, or just about playing golf or whatever, because that's effectively like saying, well, I'm just going to buy 1 or 2 stocks in my portfolio and fingers crossed they'll go up. You actually put in a range of methodologies. So this is where you can use yoga, breath work, etc., to complement other things. Whether it's running marathons, climbing mountains, as I say, playing tennis, golf, whatever, those things are great. And, absolutely, the more exercise people take, the better it is mentally and physically. But that doesn't really regulate your nervous system, because it still stimulates, it creates adrenaline, it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. So
What is the nervous system? Because we talk about it quite a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
But actually, I like to go back to basics. I'm a basic sort of person. But when we talk about the nervous system, what is the nervous system?
Oh, I'm not the expert in going into the sort of
Layman's terms.
but in layman's terms, we have two types of nervous system. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which I think is anything other than sympathetic, which is fight or flight.
That's right. Yeah,
But, so, you are on high alert all
constantly.
the time,
Yeah,
and your cortisol's raised, your blood pressure's up. Basically, in layman's terms, you're ready to run away from the tiger. He's coming to eat you, and you're legging it away from the tiger. I use the tiger because that's the example that Sanjeev uses, coming from the Indian desert. But and then the parasympathetic is your rest and digest. So, and that's what yoga does. If you live with a heightened sense of fight or flight, so your sympathetic nervous system is always like this, which is what, dare I say it, a lot of people experience in corporate life. They're never ever getting time to get that rest and digest part, the parasympathetic system, to actually calm down, get the brain lowered, get the blood pressure down, get the heart rate down, get the cortisol levels down, and that's where the problems start to happen. And because of the world in which we live in, which is on all the time, it's digital,
constant.
It's constant. People are answering emails 24/7. Go on holiday, and the laptop or the I was going to say BlackBerry, that shows my age. The laptop or the iPad or the phone comes out. You never actually switch off. So using techniques to train your nervous system to rest and digest lowers the blood pressure, lowers the heart rate, reduces the cortisol, and therefore you can think more clearly. You can function more as a normal human being than you can do if you're just constantly on.
And how many people would you say, roughly, because you've worked in corporate, you've been in a senior position yourself, you've networked with senior people, how many of those, as a rough percentage, are in this sort of constant fight or flight, and do they recognize they're in it?
Very good question. I would say a lot of them are in fight or flight. Definitely CEOs, CFOs, the most senior people, and certainly most of the executive team will be, probably to a greater or lesser extent. And of course, the tone comes from the top, which is something that any of my former colleagues will go, she's saying it again, but it is absolutely true. And if you are in fight or flight mode all the time, that permeates through the whole organization. So suddenly that gets cascaded down to other team leaders, managers, et cetera, and that just goes down through. So it makes the whole organization.
Everyone's on edge.
Everybody's on edge. And I've been doing a lot of research over the last few months in particular, and McKinsey are doing reports, Deloitte's done reports, and the statistics are really quite scary. It's around 60% of executives report some sort of burnout or stress symptoms. It's something scary like, and it's something like 80% of executives say they have some sort of wellness program in their organization, and yet all the same people who work for those organizations reported something like an 87% level of stress or burnout in some shape or form across the whole workforce. And a separate report said that only 10% of employees are actively engaged with their organization. Now, these are quite scary statistics, because people are literally getting used to functioning like this, and they will be carrying that stress level even when they go and play football or golf or tennis or swim or whatever they do. They're still carrying that level of stress, because they'll mitigate it to some extent, but they won't be able to regulate their nervous system as well as they might, and that then starts to have very long-term effects, which lead to heart disease, anxiety, all these sort of things which can, and high blood pressure, etc., which can then start to become medical conditions which are avoidable. But so in answer to your question, I think there are a lot of people who are operating that, but it is the norm. And it's almost accepted that that's what you do. Other people will decompress using, alcohol, drugs, other things. There are different outlets to relieving that stress, but that will only ever be on a very temporary, short-term basis. So it really is a big problem, and I think a lot of people know it is, but how, you're in a good job, you're being paid well, you like the challenge. How do you stop it happening? And really, the wake-up call, as always, happens when somebody in the organisation has a heart attack or goes off with, a burnout symptoms and is off for 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And that is usually when somebody goes, oh, maybe we should do something about this.
Yeah.
And by that point, it's too late, at least for the person it's happened to. But going down the prevention route rather than, curing, is obviously the most sensible thing to do. But that's why I feel so strongly about introducing these concepts to senior leaders to say, actually, don't wait for your guys to burn out. Don't wait for the worst thing to happen. Do something about it now, not only because it will avoid that sort of thing happening, but actually you're all operating. If that is the case, obviously I'm making a very wide, but a lot of people are operating suboptimally because they are constantly in that fight or flight situation. So therefore, so they don't function at their best. Therefore, they cannot possibly working in the best interest. The company cannot perform at its very best because they aren't, and they're the leaders. So it's risk mitigation. Effectively, it's saying de-risk your business by actually looking at the health of the people who are running the business, and by default, everybody else in the organisation, and you should be getting a better performing company as a result of it.
Is this more of a challenge than it was when you were in your corporate career, when you were dealing with stakeholders and shareholders and giving updates on portfolios and where people are at? Is this more of a challenge because you're trying to change quite embedded perceptions in the workplace?
Personally, I don't think it is, because I genuinely believe that this works, and I would say actually I've come across some much bigger challenges in my time, to be perfectly honest with you, some of which seem really quite de minimis in comparison to what seems to me just so logical and obvious. Why wouldn't you want to look after yourself and that of your colleagues first, before worrying about anything else? Because it is absolutely proven that the knock-on effects of somebody who is really working, operating to the best in their optimal health will do a much better job than anybody who's operating suboptimally. And to completely not misquote, but I can't quote him accurately, but Steve Jobs effectively gave that incredibly moving speech before he died, saying, bluntly, you can, and I'm paraphrasing very badly here, but basically, you can have all the money in the world. You can pay somebody to drive your car, you can pay somebody to clean your house, you can pay somebody to, drive your super yacht, but you can't pay somebody to die for you. And you hear this expression, you've only got one life, live it, and all this sort of stuff, which, because, yeah. Oh, but I've just got to do this, and I've just got to do that. no, you really, really only, you cannot get somebody else to die for you. You know, this is all you've got.
Why are we so wired like that though? Because it's, if you look at it logically, you think this isn't a dress rehearsal. You've got one life, and whatever happens, we don't really know. So that's it.
Yeah.
So your time is limited.
Yeah.
And everyone leaves here dead.
Yes.
Right. So
No exceptions.
that's it. Absolutely, 100%. We all end in the same. So we know that. But even when you say that, I recognise the old me that would have said, yeah. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'll give it some thought. I'm just going to go back to this email. It seems I'm preconditioned and wired programmed to go back into this herd mentality. And I find that fascinating, where the logic is, well, hang on a minute. What you're saying is, if you get the balance right, if you can manage your nervous system, you will have a better workforce. You'll arguably have better results. You'll actually probably hit your goals quicker. But still, I go back to being, not just me, many people go back to, let me just do this email first, or I need to deal with some problem, which isn't really a problem.
Yeah.
Why are we like that?
Yeah, it is scary. And I am going to, again, badly paraphrase Warren Buffett, who to a group of college students years ago said, right, he gave one lecture and he said, okay, I'm going to allow you all, I can't remember whether they were 18, 20, doesn't really matter. You're allowed to buy one car. I'll give you £1 million, whatever you like, you can buy one car. It can be a Lamborghini, it can be a Ford Fiesta, I don't care. You buy one car, so, and you've got to write the name of the car down on a bit of paper. So they were, you know. And he says, right. And he said, and that is the car you are going to have for the rest of your life. You are never, ever, ever allowed to change it. So it's got to last you all that time. What are you going to do with that car? You know, there's all sorts of things. And it's, well, you're going to look after it, aren't you? You're going to get it serviced regularly. You're going to get it new tyres. You're going to put petrol in it. You're going to make sure it doesn't run out of oil. You're going to put new windscreen wipers on it. And so I go on. So that's your body. You only have one body. You only have one mind. You know, why treat it? Why abuse it? It would be a bit like driving that car into the ground and going, oh, shit, it's not going to work anymore because I have abused it, because I took it round a skid track at 100 miles an hour and it can only do 50 miles an hour or whatever. So I thought that was an absolutely brilliant analogy, because it is literally, you only have this vessel once, and if you don't keep repairing it and looking after it and treating it with respect, then guess what? It's going to pack up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
scary, isn't it?
It is really, really scary. And actually, I think, coming back to your question, when you are immersed in something, you literally cannot see the wood for the trees. And when you are in a world of corporate individuals and everybody is behaving the same and broadly looking the same and dressing the same, and it's very difficult to step back and go, oh, hang on a second, maybe this isn't quite what we should be doing. And I have certainly noticed, since I came out of full-time corporate life, and when I do come back, which I do, to whether it's to board meetings, whether it's to conferences, whatever, and I look at some of the people in the room and I think, oh my gosh, you know, there is not a very healthy bunch
you can
of
see
people.
it in people, can you?
You can see it. You can see it. And even if it's somebody who's relatively slim, and I can think of a few people off the top of my head who I obviously am not going to name, you know, and I can tell they're absolutely stressed out of their skulls. And when I say, you know, I think, you know, let's have a coffee sometime and I'll tell you. And they go, oh, yeah, well, you know, I'd absolutely love to, but, you know, I'm really, really busy. I've no idea. No. And then, or a few people, I get a bit further down the conversation and say, you know, how are you? How do you cope? You know, how are you coping at the moment? It must be really tough. You know, I know what it's like, and one thing, and then they go, no, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Yeah, I go running every evening. I'm fine. Yeah, I've got it all sorted out. Don't worry. I'm absolutely fine. And you're thinking, well, I mean, I'm no medic.
Do you think they're genuine though, in terms of
they genuinely
they actually think they are fine, totally grounded?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And you know, I'm sure some are, but a lot aren't.
Yeah.
And you know, I know people who said, I just had to pack up before I keeled over. Well, that's a bit of a crazy situation.
It's
But
not worth it, is it?
no,
It really isn't worth it.
well, you know, who who wants to be in that position, you know, where you are going, you know, you create yourself, make yourself ill, or even worse state, you know, you're suddenly attending the funeral of a former colleague who completely burnt out and keeled over because it was
Mm.
more important to make the money and have the bigger house and the better this, or just prove themselves, even if it wasn't bigger and better, it was just prove to themselves rather than to anybody else that that was what they should be doing. And yeah, when you keel over, you
That's
keel
it.
over.
I'm curious about this because having gone through some of this myself, which is, I call it the inner work, um, and you start to see things in a different way. If there are people out there who are thinking, okay, there might be something in this, but they're looking at it from a P&L perspective in terms of driving the profit and the revenue, would you still accept that as a win, as a step in the right direction, as opposed to perhaps finding that union, the deeper connection? Do you see where I go with that?
Yeah, yeah.
So you can have one side where this is good and it's proven, and that's great, so people can go down that path, but they may not then step into the other side, which is the more grounded and the more sort of appreciating of everything. Would you just accept?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And I'm not all the way into sort of some of I don't go as far as a lot of people do on this journey, shall we say.
Yeah.
um to me it is there's still a big corporate chunk of me in here,
Yeah.
and this is what I'm implying. You know, I'm not saying you have to go and, you know, hug trees or anything like that. That's not what
It's pretty cool. I've done it. It's weird.
yeah, it's a bit weird, but you know,
Especially when people see you walking the dog as well.
um but
So it's
no,
moving the dial then.
it is just moving the dial, but just going, just from a logical perspective, if you've got people in your organization at any level, but particularly at senior level, who are struggling, they're not functioning properly, worst case scenario, they have, you know, they burn out and they go, just can't cope. I've just got to take some time out. So obviously you give them time out, but that means they're not there. You can't replace them because they're just having some long-term sick. So then everybody else has got to function without them. They then come back and they probably take a bit of a measured while to get back up to speed again, which is absolutely fine. But you've probably lost 6 months of that person, which could potentially have been avoided. Worst case scenario, somebody burns out and keels over and says, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. I'm off. You've then got to replace them. There's a financial cost on both scores, whether they're away or whether they have to be replaced. Then you've got that corporate knowledge of that individual, whoever comes in to replace them. You know, it's going to take them, I always say it takes 6 months to get into any role, minimum, more likely a year, particularly at senior level. So the company all this time is losing out financially, and performance is not going to be as good because A, that person or those people are not operating optimally, and B, you know, if they are out for any period, it just is going to have a negative effect. So it does seem to me much more logical to spend some money and invest in your people, because whatever percentage you spend is unlikely to be anywhere near as much as it is if you actually have to start going down the alternative route. And I think what a lot of leaders should be doing is actually really looking at actually how many people in their organ, do they really measure how many people have left? They probably do, but what do they do about it? How many people have actually gone off sick? You know, suddenly somebody's having days off here or there, you know, because they're saying they've got a cold or they've got a migraine. But actually, this is just a warning sign of something that's actually much bigger. And how many firms are actually really looking at that?
Yeah.
And I would say some are, and some are very, very good at it. But
So this is about moving the dial. Then this is about seeing the logic in regulating your own nervous system anyway, as opposed to hugging trees and licking newts, for example. Okay, you don't have to go that far.
Absolutely not.
But there are techniques that will improve the health of yourself and obviously your staff.
And you can still look as corporate and as whatever you want, image you want to portray as possible, you know, but inside you're functioning on a much better.
So image is still important then with regard, or the perception of
I
looking
think,
corporate.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people it is, and that's fine, absolutely fine. You know, it was actually interesting today coming along and thinking, do I go corporate or do I turn up in yoga kit? You know, and now if I can't turn
Lululemon,
up, Lululemon, yes, exactly. I've advertised them twice now. But if I turned up in yoga kit, immediately people would go, oh, you know. Whereas it's the same person. It's just the way I'm thinking.
Are you comfortable with yourself now with regards to who you are?
Yeah.
And where you've come on over the last sort of 5 to 6 years?
Yeah.
So
really comfortable.
Totally fine. Doesn't really matter, and you're quite happy to talk about this because
Totally. Because I genuinely believe it makes a difference, and I genuinely believe that it has a ripple effect as well, because it's not just your work colleagues, it's also your family and your home life. Because, you know, I've know plenty of people who don't go straight home. They go to the pub first to decompress before they go home, or they go home and, you know, have a few large gin and tonics, or snap husband or wife's heads off, or the children's heads off. You know, it does have stress and associated symptoms have massive ripple effect, you know, or they will take, you know, huge chunks of time to go and play golf or whatever, which I'm not criticizing because it's good for you, obviously.
Movement,
but it is movement, and it's mentally, but you know, it does have an impact on the rest of the family, or can have an impact on the rest of the family. And I am being very, very general here. So, you know, I hope nobody's going to go, well, but, you know, we're encouraged to exercise. And yes, it's complementary too. But I do genuinely believe that if we actually get ourselves out of this wired, I know people who say, but I sent you a WhatsApp and you didn't reply within half an hour.
Oh, chill out.
But that's how society, you know, we're.
No one thanks you though.
No
one's going to go to your funeral and say, Sarah, she was great on WhatsApp.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not going to happen. So, you know, and all the social media that we know, all this sort of instant stuff, and of course this is permeating into businesses. You know, more and more businesses, you know, have got to get faster results, quicker. It's all about, you know, we want these returns, but in a much shorter period of time.
Yeah.
Certainly, when I first started, and you know, it was all in this industry. It was very a gradual process. You know, you built it up over a period of time, and that gradual compounding created, well, Brundolphin the size that it is now. Whereas if you're trying to get all these short-term, you know, instant results and returns and all this sort of stuff, it's going to have an impact on the people running the business and the people working in the business. And, you know, people are expected to produce all this sort of stuff, but, you know, not invest, you can't spend any more money on marketing, you can't spend more money on this, you can't spend more money on that. And you're going, well, you know, this is just pressure, which is just building to get results.
And there
Now,
has to be a release of that pressure. But
and there has to be a
you,
release of that
you,
pressure.
you mentioned some stats earlier on, and I can't remember them precisely, but it sounded like there was a disconnect with people engaging with the wellness program. I think it was like 10% or 13%. So do you think where companies have an active program like or health and wellbeing, that it's become more of a tick box exercise rather than perhaps a real probably deeper dive with regards to what is actually needed?
Yeah, I think there are some companies who do it brilliantly. They tend to be the larger ones because they have more money to throw at it. But there are a lot of companies who will have, corporate gym membership or cycle to work schemes or, things like this, which are all very well and good. But, I, for example, wouldn't go to a gym if you drilled holes in my feet because I can't stand the gym. Cycle to work schemes, I barely know of anybody who ever takes it up. It might be okay if you live in London and you don't want to risk life and limb cycling along a London street. But if you live, for example, like Hawksmoor head office was in Exeter, a lot of people, were catching a bus in or driving in. They're not going to cycle, to take them 3 hours to get to the bloody office, let alone
-5, yeah.
yeah, exactly. My journey when I was at Burnout in Marlborough, I think it would have probably taken me about 3 hours to get into the office on a bicycle.
Not going to work.
It's just not going to work. But so people are sort of doing things, and there are mental health programs. There might be Mental Health Day, which is, I'm not knocking it because you can't knock anything that's people are trying to do, but it's just scratching
The intention's
the
there,
surface.
isn't it?
The intention is there, but I would say in a lot of cases, there's no desire to spend any money on. It falls into the same category, dare I say it, as training,
learning
coaching,
development, yeah.
and probably marketing.
Yeah.
If the money's tight, those are the things that are scrapped first. And I always said, and I've said this for years and years and years, if a company is underperforming, what should you do? You should actually spend money on your marketing, spend money on training your people to retain them.
Yeah.
And look after them, cuddle them, love them, because you don't want to lose them if you're struggling. You really need to keep those people on board and keep them energized and engaged, and get something out, because you'll get through that hump. If you cut off all that money, then actually all you do is go into survival mode.
Do you know Rory Sutherland, the marketer?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know he said exactly the same thing? He said when budgets are tight, the first things that are cut are learning development.
Yeah.
Your budget to go out and meet people. He said those are the things you should protect.
Exactly.
Because those are the things that keep people together. It creates then the creativity that are needed when businesses are going through a tough time.
Exactly.
But it's the first thing to be cut. And you would be in a budget holder. You would have seen that first time to say, well, we've got to cut this, whatever.
Yeah.
Looking back, would you have changed that now? With what you know now, would you have said no? Because I could imagine you'd be quite strong in there, in your opinion. But knowing what you know now, would you have said, I am not cutting this budget?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, I have heard myself, I can still hear myself saying it, in the past of, this is madness to cut this because we're actually going to lose out in the long run. But I feel even more strongly about it now. Now, maybe that's because I'm not actually running a company anymore. So it's, I can be more vocal about it. But for example, if somebody, what I can say is that somebody going into the Priory for a month, if they've completely burnt out and they've, and somebody's just hit the bottle too hard or whatever, and they need help, and some organisations, do pay for people to go into the Priory, it's around £30,000 for a month in the Priory. Wow. So I'm told. £30,000 spent on your senior leadership team could actually avoid, I'm not saying it could definitely do it, but it would certainly help towards avoiding some of the issues that cause people to burn out in the first place. Now, and you don't need to work do the numbers too hard to
Mm.
realize that actually investing in people and in their health is a darn sight cheaper in the long run than it is to pay for remedial stuff.
Yeah.
Without exception.
Especially if you've got a larger business and you've got 1,000 people and a certain percentage are off sick and it's 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
It's a compounding problem.
It's a compounding problem, exactly. And it affects everybody. And it also, from a psychological point of view, for those who are left, because they have to pick up the slack, and suddenly they're going, well, this is absolutely ridiculous. And then they feel the pressure and so it goes on.
Mm.
And then in a small organisation, it's even worse because the impact is even greater.
It is. It's even greater.
Yeah.
I think since I've come out with regards to some of the practices, I've noticed other people saying, that's really interesting. I'd like to know more. And I think that's a real positive.
Yeah.
I was a bit worried when, a few months ago we did our breath work. I was a bit like, I'm actually now starting to publicly state that, I think there's something in this, but I never do it with regards to I want to mend people, fix people. I'm trying to encourage people to try different things, to find their own path, as opposed to perhaps going just to therapy or going to the doctor. I want them to explore other avenues, and hopefully they can find something that works for them.
Yes.
But I have noticed that since I've gone a bit more public with regards to what we're doing within the business and what I do privately, people are interested to know more. But I do think there need to be more voices. Obviously, we're having this conversation that need to say the same thing.
Yeah.
That it's okay to try these different things. I know your motives may be slightly different, but ultimately, it's based. If you look at the logic, it's there. But if you look at the science, it's there as well. And I've always lived in quite a the irony here, quite a scientific mind. I know it didn't quite work out for you with physics, but I've always wanted perhaps that comfort that maybe I can't just have woo-woo. I need the scientific, Andrew Huberman, the evidence, the PhD, and that's okay. But I do think it is there if you go looking for it. It's based in science as well, that you can actually see the benefits of what we do.
I totally agree with you. And I would preface this by saying I'm not saying everybody should go out and do yoga by any stretch of the imagination. To your point, and yoga is actually a very wide-ranging subject in its own right, but at least explore different ways that you can manage your nervous system and basically get out of that fight or flight mode and reduce the chances of getting sick. I completely agree with you that science, the science is becoming. Scientists are definitely recognizing the benefits of yoga, breathwork, meditation, and Sanjeev, who I've been working with for the last year, who we actually named the yoga scientist because he has been working with scientists from the Berlin Mind Institute and actually demonstrating that what is happening through yoga practices, very, very simple things. I'm not talking about any fancy stuff at all, is actually the scientists are starting to say, gosh, yeah, we can actually see how this works from a scientific perspective. So once you start applying that science, then you really are starting to actually get people to go, okay, there may be something in it, exactly to your point. So I think,
It's interesting, and I think it's needed, this conversation, because as you very eloquently pointed out, that the thirst and the need to grow and to drive it's going to be there. It's compounding. It's getting worse. So maybe we do need to look at alternative ways of improving the workforce, improving yourself as well. So I think it's only going to get worse in the way that we live, and with the advent of technology, you can just see that we just need to take a step back. Can you share anything where you've been able to make a decision with clarity, or whether yoga's helped you to make a decision that perhaps you wouldn't have taken if you were in this constant fight or flight?
I can certainly think of moments, without being specific in any shape or form, where I perhaps, probably more importantly, didn't do something that
Okay.
I would have done if I'd been in that fight or flight mode. So actually making that one step back, just thinking a bit more clearly, taking a few breaths and going, hang on a second, we're going down a trajectory here, which I actually think is going to cost us a lot of time and a lot of money, and I can't really see the benefit. But there is such a force to go down that route. Could we just all take a step back and have a rethink about how we're going to do this? So it has as much been about just slowing everything down, slowing the thinking process, having that sort of rational conversation of, are we really, really sure this is the right thing to do? But it has also helped for me in getting maybe challenging projects or initiatives that maybe sometimes were a little unpopular. And actually using, when you're about to implement something which a lot of people are not very keen to do.
Lead balloon. Come on, guys.
Yeah, you can see the body language is you're going. Again, that can help because you can feel very confrontational if you're asking a group of people to do something, which ultimately I have on more than one occasion found they've turned around sometime later and said, well, thank you very much. That's been fantastic. But, you kind of need to have a bit more resilience than just, right, we're going to do this, because that just doesn't work. It just becomes a complete conflict issue. So, yes, it has helped both positively, well, I say proactively and avoiding being too reactive to a situation.
And when we talk about the nervous system and stress, are we talking about with breath work and yoga and the different sort of avenues? Is this a way just to manage stress or sort of banish stress?
We'll never banish stress, unfortunately. But then again, I say unfortunately, stress is part of life. It's the amount of stress. I mean, to a certain extent, we all need a bit of stress because that kind of keeps the momentum going. But it is definitely managing the stress levels. And as the pressure mounts, in this case on corporate executives to deliver, it's how one can manage the stress in order to be able to deliver what is expected. So it's very much a management issue, not a banishment.
Never going to happen.
Is never going to happen.
No, we're wired. We're wired in that way. So we've got from wealth management to health management. That'll be the thumbnail for this podcast.
Yes.
It's very good. So what do you? What does the future look like for you? What are you offering leaders that are tuning into this podcast?
So I've decided to put I was going to say my money where my mouth is, but actually what I've done, having worked with Sanjeev for the last year and really understood how traditional yoga operates, but also compounding that to the impact of, so not just using yoga as a method of and addressing issues through this nervous system, but also looking at sleep in particular, at nutrition, and as we've mentioned, breath work. So what I've done is actually found a business which is designed to help corporates and individuals, but the main focus is to support executives and then by default the rest of the people in their organization to actually deal with some of the issues, to bring in experts who can help with sleep, help with breath work, help with yoga, and help with nutrition as what I call the four pillars, which I've mentioned before. There are all sorts of other things that can be explored. I mean, I think menopause, which has really only come onto the radar of a lot of organizations in the last couple of years, but I think that's a very big topic. And there are I mean, loneliness is another one, which is, loneliness is now said to be as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. A truly lonely person
Wow.
that can have that sort of impact on your physical health. It's all these sort of things. You start to look into it and you go, oh my God, there are so many things, and there are so many ways in which this can be managed through energy healing, Ayurvedic medicine, sound healing. I mean, that's another very powerful area where actually if people think yoga's woo woo, people look at one thing
Next
as
level. Yeah.
sound level,
Yeah.
but actually going to immersing yourself in a sound bath for an hour, the power of that, or listening to music at a certain level is also
It's vibration.
It is vibration, and it really, really helps. And I can't think of a single person, even good old dad dancing at a wedding, who won't say they feel better when they've come off the dance floor, even if it's for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So there are, and that is what I incorporate when I think of movement. I don't just think about yoga. I think about dance. I think about that type of movement. So, but coming back to the basics is what I've done is set up a business actually in memory of my friend Katie, who, because she actually died 3 years ago. But her middle name was Estelle, so I've called it Estelle Health and Wealth.
Very
And
nice.
it is the health management and wealth management, and it's the wealth of the organisation and the health of the organisation. And other things, but I'm not going to go into that right now.
Yeah.
But it is named after Katie, but it is really about going to it's to the CFOs and the CEOs in particular. I'm not decrying most people will get as far as HR, and HR go, I think this would be a really good idea, and the CFO, with all due respect, says, well, we haven't got the budget, and it stops there. Whereas actually going to the CEOs and the CFOs and saying, these are the benefits of actually looking after your team. We'll start with the 4 basics, but can be expanded into all sorts of different directions. To your point, some people may try yoga a couple of times and go, absolutely not for me. But I'm quite interested in the sleep side, because I do actually struggle with insomnia. So I'd like to focus a little bit more on that. Or actually my eating habits are absolutely terrible. I just go to Pret and get the same sandwich every day, or whatever. Sorry, Pret. But actually educating people to say, well, have you thought about different things to have for lunch, for example? I mean, in London, for example, you can get great salads and that sort of thing, but a great big pasta creamy salad is as bad as eating basically a ham baguette. Have you thought from a nutritional point of view about how you could eat better, and then maybe the weight would just probably fall off, rather than thinking you've got to go and pound on the treadmill in the gym every day, which you don't enjoy, and then that means you can't go home to the kids, and blah, 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 and so the ripple effect goes on. So the whole idea behind Estelle is actually to coordinate experts and curate courses or experiences for teams to work with, either collectively or individually, that would help the organisation function. And that's what we're looking to do. And tagging on to maybe a strategy day or an away day, and saying, well, actually, we can work with the team for 24 hours before they actually sit down. So rather than arriving and going, right, we're now going to plot the strategy for 2027, oh God, but I've just got to answer this email, and by the way, blah, 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 and absolutely wired. Or we take them for 24 hours, give them some, go through some workshops and some exercises, actually bring them to a point where by the time they start their strategy day, they're feeling a bit more grounded. They've just got the nervous system back into a much more measured operational mode. Maybe it might benefit the strategy planning, for example, or whatever it is they're doing. And that's really where we're starting from as a starting point.
It sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. I do think it's a very worthwhile conversation to have. And I guess my final question is, If someone is watching this today in a leadership capacity, what is one thing that you would want them to start doing and one thing you'd want them to stop doing?
I'm going to turn it the other way around.
Okay.
Stop putting your head in the sand and pretending you are all right, your colleagues are all right, you know, everything can just keep going. And because at some point, somebody or something is going to go pop. So get your head out of the sand is my stop.
Stop doing it, yeah.
I would say treat the health of your staff as your number one priority and put it on the agenda at the executive committee and at the board meeting, and own it. Don't hand it off to anybody else. The CEO and the CFO own it, not HR, not anybody else. Own it and deliver it, and tell other CEOs and CFOs, because I think that way peer pressure is one of the most effective ways of getting things done. But you just need one company, one CEO to say, right, I am going to lead on this. I'm going to make it part of the agenda, and we are going to actively do it. And we are going to really know what's going on in the organisation, really know, people do staff surveys, but they're either tick box exercise or they ask the wrong questions or they're completely ignored. Actually take those really seriously, but ask the right questions. Own it as the leader of the business. And that to me would be an absolute win situation. Lead from the top, get your executive team on board. You don't have to be doing trees or downward dogs or headstands or anything like that. Just a bit of breathing is absolutely fine, but just own it and deliver it and live by it. And I would be very surprised if that does not improve performance, staff retention, deliver the results. And that to me would be where I would really like to see.
Wise words. Final question. I've always got one more. I ask this with all guests. So I'm going to give you a magic wand. And this magic wand has got one wish and one wish only. What would you wish for and why?
For me personally, or for...
It's just, you have a wish for anything.
Ooh. I wish that adopting techniques, I wish people would just take this, we only have one life, live it seriously. Actually, that's what I really wish for, because I think if people don't take it seriously, we're just going to carry on, and the world is not going to be a better place. So I wish people really accept this is one vessel, this car is the only one we've got, look after it. And I would like to be able to help, certainly in a corporate environment and in an individual environment, to facilitate that.
Brilliant. Sarah Soar, thank you very much.
James, thank you very much
today.
indeed. It's
Really
been a
appreciate
pleasure.
your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.